Sometimes the thing that changes your life doesn't arrive with a warning. Sometimes it pulls up to a homeless shelter in a black sedan. I was sitting on a weathered wooden bench outside the shelter with my 6-year-old grandson, Ethan, when I first saw the car. At the time, I didn't know that everything I believed about the last 2 years of my life was about to change. The afternoon air carried the scent of freshly cut grass from the small park across the street. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. Ethan sat beside me, carefully drawing superheroes in a coloring book someone had donated to the shelter. He was so focused that the tip of his tongue stuck out slightly from the corner of his mouth. It always did when he concentrated. I smiled as I watched him. Even after everything we had been through, he still found reasons to smile. That was one of the many things I loved about him. We had been living at the shelter for almost 8 months. 8 months of shared rooms, donated clothes, and trying to make each day feel normal for a little boy who deserved so much more. I was 67 years old. I never imagined I would spend my retirement standing in line for free meals or worrying about where we would sleep next month. But life has a way of humbling you when you least expect it. Ethan looked up from his coloring book. "Grandma, do you think Mom knows where we are?" The question hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I forced a gentle smile. "I don't know, sweetheart." That broke my heart more than any argument ever could. Children shouldn't learn disappointment that young. They shouldn't learn silence either. I glanced toward the street and noticed a black sedan turning the corner. It looked out of place in our neighborhood. Expensive cars didn't come here often. The engine shut off. For several seconds, nobody got out. Then the driver's side door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped onto the pavement. He looked to be in his early 50s. Clean-cut, professional. The kind of person who belonged in a downtown office tower, not outside a shelter on the edge of town. He scanned the area until his eyes landed on me. My stomach tightened. He began walking toward us with calm, measured steps. Ethan looked up from his coloring book. "Grandma, is that man coming here?" Before I could answer, the stranger stopped a few feet away. His expression softened when he looked at Ethan. Then he turned to me. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are you Margaret Collins?" My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard my full name spoken like that in a very long time. "Yes," I replied cautiously. The man reached into his jacket pocket. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "I've been looking for you for almost 2 years." For a moment, I could not speak. 2 years. The man said he had been looking for me for 2 years, and all I could do was stare at him. Ethan looked up at me, then at the stranger. His small hand quietly found mine. I squeezed it without taking my eyes off the man. "There must be some mistake," I said. "I have not exactly been difficult to find." The man gave me a sympathetic look. "Actually, Mrs. Collins, you have." He reached into his jacket and carefully removed a cream-colored envelope. It looked expensive, the kind of stationery people used for important business matters. My name was written across the front in neat handwriting. Margaret Collins. Seeing it there felt strange. For so long, I had felt invisible. The man held the envelope out to me. "My name is Daniel Mercer," he said. "I work for Reed & Associates. Nathan Reed asked me to deliver this personally." The name meant nothing to me. I shook my head. "I do not know anyone named Nathan Reed." "You knew your son, Ryan Collins," Daniel replied gently. The mention of Ryan hit me like a sudden gust of cold air. Even after 2 years, hearing my son's name still made my chest tighten. Ryan had been my only child. The kind of son who remembered birthdays, who called every Sunday, who never forgot to tell me he loved me before hanging up the phone. Losing him had changed everything. Losing him had started the chain of events that eventually brought Ethan and me to this shelter. Daniel seemed to notice the change in my expression. Nathan Reed knew Ryan very well. My fingers tightened around the envelope. Ethan looked between us. "Was he friends with my dad?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes, young man. Very good friends." Ethan smiled faintly. It was the first smile I had seen from him all afternoon. That alone made me pay closer attention. "Open the envelope," Daniel said. "Please." I hesitated before carefully breaking the seal. Inside was a folded letter and a business card. The card was simple. Nathan Reed, attorney at law. Beneath it was a downtown address I recognized immediately. It was located in one of the most expensive office buildings in the city. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the letter. Before I could begin reading, a memory surfaced unexpectedly. Ryan standing in my kitchen nearly 3 years ago. Tired, distracted, looking over his shoulder as if he was carrying a burden he could not share. I remembered asking him if everything was all right. I remembered the forced smile he gave me. And I remembered one sentence. One strange sentence that had made no sense at the time. Mom, if anything ever happens to me, trust the people I trust. At the time I had laughed and told him he was talking nonsense. Now those words echoed in my mind with unsettling clarity. I lowered the letter and looked at Daniel. What is this about? I asked quietly. Daniel glanced toward the black sedan parked nearby. Then he looked back at me. Mrs. Collins, he said, the reason you and Ethan ended up here was not an accident. And if you read that letter, you are finally going to understand why. My eyes dropped to the letter again. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Around us, the shelter carried on as usual. A volunteer pushed a cart of donated supplies through the front doors. A couple sat talking quietly near the entrance. Somewhere behind me, a child laughed. Yet everything suddenly felt distant, as if the world had stepped back and left me alone with whatever waited inside that envelope. Ethan shifted closer to me. Grandma, what does it say? He asked. I swallowed hard. I do not know yet, sweetheart. The truth was that I was afraid to find out. For 2 years I had been surviving one day at a time, worrying about bus fare, stretching grocery vouchers, making sure Ethan always had a warm coat in the winter and clean clothes for school. I had stopped expecting miracles. Life was simpler that way, safer. Hope could be dangerous when you had already lost so much. Slowly, I unfolded the letter completely. The handwriting immediately caught my attention. My breath stopped. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, and notes left on the refrigerator for years. It belonged to Ryan. Oh my God, I whispered. Ethan looked up instantly. What is it? My eyes scanned the first line. Mom, if you are reading this, it means Nathan finally found you. For a moment, I could not continue. The words blurred behind a sudden rush of tears. Not because I was crying uncontrollably. I had done enough crying over the past 2 years to last a lifetime. It was the shock. The simple shock of hearing my son's voice again through words he had written with his own hand. I took a slow breath and kept reading. Mom, there are things I could not explain before. Things I hoped would never matter. If circumstances have forced Nathan to deliver this letter, then events unfolded exactly as I feared they might. My stomach tightened. Daniel stood silently nearby, giving me space. I continued reading. First, I need you to know something. None of what happened to you and Ethan was your fault. The sentence hit me harder than anything else. Because deep down, despite everything, I had blamed myself. Maybe I should have fought harder. Maybe I should have questioned more things. Maybe I should have seen the warning signs sooner. Ryan seemed to answer those thoughts from beyond the years. You trusted people because that is who you are. Never apologize for having a good heart. Ethan noticed my expression. Grandma. I looked down at him and forced a small smile. Your dad wrote this. His eyes widened. Dad. I nodded. He leaned against me as I continued. Then I reached the next paragraph. The moment I read the first sentence, every ounce of warmth disappeared from my body. If Claire ever tried to separate you from Ethan or force you out of your home, it means she discovered the trust. And if she discovered the trust, then she knows exactly what Ethan is entitled to. For several seconds, I could not move. The words seemed frozen on the page. Ethan is entitled to. Entitled to what? My eyes searched the letter desperately, trying to understand what Ryan had been trying to tell me. Ethan remained pressed against my side. He was old enough to sense that something important was happening, but still too young to understand why my hands were shaking. I continued reading. Mom, there is something I never told anyone except Nathan. Not Claire. Not her family. No one. I wanted to tell you myself one day, but circumstances changed faster than I expected. If you are reading this now, Nathan will explain the details. For now, all you need to know is that Ethan's future was secured long before he was born. My heart pounded harder. Secured? The word felt completely disconnected from the life we had been living. There was nothing secure about sharing a room with strangers. Nothing secure about counting every dollar before buying groceries. Nothing secure about watching Ethan outgrow shoes faster than I could afford to replace them. Yet Ryan was telling me that something had been set aside for Ethan years ago. Something important enough that he felt the need to hide it. I looked up at Daniel. What trust is he talking about? I asked quietly. Daniel exchanged a brief glance with the envelope in my hands before answering. That is something Mr. Reed will explain in person. Why not now? I asked. Because the full story involves legal documents that should be reviewed together. I hated that answer. After 2 years of uncertainty, I wanted facts. Not more mystery. Not more waiting. But before I could press him further, another memory surfaced. A family dinner nearly 3 years earlier. Ryan sitting across from me. Claire smiling politely while scrolling through her phone. Ethan still a toddler in a high chair. At the time, I had noticed Ryan watching his son with an unusual expression. Not sadness. Not worry. Something closer to determination. I remembered teasing him about being an overprotective father. Ryan had laughed and changed the subject. Now I wondered what had really been going through his mind. Had he already known something? Had he already been planning for possibilities the rest of us never considered? My eyes returned to the letter. The next paragraph made my stomach tighten even more. If Claire ever claims there is nothing left for Ethan, do not believe her. If she tells you certain records disappeared, do not believe her. And if she suddenly becomes interested in where you live or what you know, contact Nathan immediately. I read the lines twice. Then a third time. A cold realization began forming inside me. Claire had not simply asked Ethan and me to leave after Ryan was gone. She had acted quickly. Too quickly. Within months, decisions had been made. Accounts had supposedly been closed. Paperwork had supposedly been completed. Every question I asked had been answered with vague explanations and polite smiles. At the time, grief had clouded my judgment. I had accepted what I was told because I was exhausted. Now those memories felt different. Suddenly, every conversation carried a shadow I had never noticed before. Daniel cleared his throat softly. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "Nathan is expecting you this afternoon." I lowered the letter and stared at him. "You mean today?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, because after you hear the rest of the story, your life and Ethan's life may never look the same again." The ride downtown felt unreal. Ethan sat beside me in the back seat, his small backpack resting on his lap, while the city passed outside the tinted windows. For years, those glass towers had belonged to another world. A world of attorneys, executives, and people who never worried about whether their grocery card would last until the end of the month. Now we were heading straight toward it. Ethan pressed his face lightly against the window. "Grandma, look how tall that building is." I followed his gaze upward. The skyscraper seemed to disappear into the afternoon sky. Reed and Associates occupied the top 3 floors. My stomach tightened as the sedan pulled beneath a covered entrance. A uniformed attendant opened the door before Daniel even had a chance to step out. Everything about this place felt expensive, quiet, controlled. We entered a marble lobby where people moved with purpose, carrying briefcases and speaking in low voices. I suddenly became very aware of my worn shoes and the faded cardigan I had washed so many times that the fabric had begun to thin. Ethan reached for my hand. I held it tightly. Daniel guided us into a private elevator. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal wall. For a moment, I barely recognized myself. 2 difficult years had changed me. The woman staring back looked older than 67, tired around the eyes, careful, guarded. Yet beneath that exhaustion, something else had begun to emerge. Curiosity, determination. The elevator opened directly into a large reception area overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed miles of skyline. Ethan stared in amazement. "Wow." A receptionist smiled warmly. "Mr. Reed is expecting you." We followed her down a quiet hallway lined with framed photographs and certificates. At the end stood a pair of wooden doors. She opened them. The office beyond was surprisingly simple. Large windows, bookshelves, a desk, nothing flashy. A man with silver hair rose from behind the desk the moment we entered. He looked to be in his early 60s. His expression changed immediately when he saw Ethan. Not surprise. Recognition. "Hello, Ethan," he said softly. Ethan looked confused. "You know my name?" The man's smile carried genuine sadness. "I knew your father." Something in his voice made the room fall silent. Nathan Reed walked around the desk and stopped in front of me. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "I wish we were meeting under different circumstances." I studied him carefully. "You were Ryan's friend?" He nodded. "For nearly 20 years. Then he reached into a drawer and removed a thick file. The folder was worn at the edges as though it had been opened many times. He placed it gently on the desk between us. "Everything changed when Ryan passed away," he said. "But what you need to understand is that certain events started long before that." He opened the folder and slid the first document toward me. My eyes dropped to the page. At the very top, printed in bold letters, were words that instantly made my pulse race. Ethan Collins Family Trust. Estimated current value, $8,400,000. For several seconds, I simply stared at the number. $8,400,000. It did not feel real. It certainly did not feel connected to the little boy sitting beside me in a borrowed chair wearing sneakers that were beginning to separate at the soles. Ethan looked up at me. "Grandma, what is a trust?" His innocent question broke the silence hanging over the room. Nathan leaned forward slightly. "It is something your father created to protect your future." Ethan nodded thoughtfully as though that explanation made perfect sense. Then he returned his attention to the view outside the window. Children have a remarkable ability to accept information without immediately worrying about it. Adults are not so fortunate. My eyes remained fixed on the document. "You are telling me this existed the entire time?" I asked quietly. Nathan nodded. "Yes." "And Claire knew about it?" Another pause. "Eventually, yes." A heavy feeling settled in my chest. Suddenly, dozens of memories began rearranging themselves in my mind. Conversations that once seemed harmless now felt different. Claire insisting certain paperwork had already been handled. Claire discouraging me from speaking directly with financial advisors after Ryan passed away. Claire repeatedly assuring me there was very little left after taxes, expenses, and debts. At the time, I had believed her. I had been grieving, exhausted, lost. Nathan opened another section of the file. Ryan established this trust years ago. He updated it several times. Every version carried the same instruction. He slid another page toward me. I recognized Ryan's signature immediately. Even after all this time, I would have known it anywhere. Beneath the signature was a single sentence highlighted in yellow. "In the event of my death, primary oversight shall transfer to Margaret Collins until Ethan reaches adulthood." I read it twice. Then a third time. "Me?" Nathan nodded. "You." My throat tightened. Ryan had trusted me. Not because I was wealthy. Not because I had special expertise. Simply because I was his mother. Because he believed I would always put Ethan first. The realization hurt and comforted me at the same time. Then why did none of this happen? I asked. Nathan's expression grew serious. Because several documents disappeared shortly after Ryan's death. The room suddenly felt colder. Disappeared? Nathan folded his hands together. Copies were removed. Notifications were redirected. Meetings were canceled. Someone worked very hard to make sure you never learned the full truth. I looked down at the file again. Every page represented opportunities Ethan had been denied. Stability, education, security, a future his father had carefully planned. My stomach turned. Nathan reached for one final folder resting beneath the others. Unlike the rest, this one contained only a single photograph. He placed it carefully on the desk. The moment I saw the image, my breath caught. It showed Ryan standing beside a man I had never met. Both were smiling. On the back, written in Ryan's handwriting, were 6 words that made my pulse begin racing all over again. "If anything happens, find him first." My eyes remained fixed on the photograph. The man standing beside Ryan looked familiar in the strange way that faces sometimes do when you have seen them only once or twice years ago. He appeared confident, successful, the kind of person who belonged in boardrooms and private meetings. Yet what unsettled me was not the man himself. It was the message Ryan had written on the back. "If anything happens, find him first." I turned the photograph over again and studied every detail. Ryan was smiling, but now that I looked closer, there was something else in his expression. Determination. Purpose. As if he already knew this picture might one day matter. Nathan noticed my silence. "His name is Jonathan Pierce," he said. "He and Ryan built something together." I looked up. "Built what?" Nathan opened another folder. "A company." That answer surprised me. Ryan had always spoken about work, but never in great detail. I knew he had done well. I knew he had spent long hours traveling and meeting clients. But he rarely discussed finances. Whenever I asked, he would simply smile and say that everything was under control. Nathan slid several documents across the desk. Years ago, Ryan invested in a technology company alongside Jonathan. The business grew much faster than anyone expected. I glanced at the paperwork. Revenue reports, partnership agreements, financial statements. The numbers seemed unreal. "Ryan never told me any of this." I whispered. "That was intentional," Nathan replied. He wanted Ethan to grow up without people treating him differently because of money. Ethan was still sitting quietly beside the window, completely unaware that adults were discussing a future worth millions of dollars. At that moment, he was more interested in counting yellow taxis moving through the streets below. Nathan continued. Ryan trusted very few people with the full picture. Jonathan was one of them. I was another. A painful realization settled over me. Ryan had been carrying responsibilities I never understood. While I was worrying about birthday dinners and holiday plans, he had been planning decades ahead. Planning for Ethan. Planning for possibilities he hoped would never happen. Then where is Jonathan now? I asked. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Looking for you. My heart skipped. What? The moment he learned what happened after Ryan passed away, he started searching. Nathan's voice remained calm. He knew something was wrong. None of the instructions Ryan left behind were being followed. Meetings were canceled. Notices went unanswered. Information stopped flowing. Every sentence made the puzzle clearer. Someone had not merely hidden documents. Someone had interrupted an entire system designed to protect Ethan. Nathan opened one final folder and removed a printed email. Jonathan sent this 3 months ago. He handed it to me. I read the first line and felt a chill run through me. I do not care how long it takes. Find Margaret and Ethan before Claire discovers what Ryan left behind. I lowered the page slowly. For the first time since entering the office, I realized this story was much bigger than missing paperwork. Much bigger than money. Because if people had spent 2 years searching for us, it meant there was still something out there important enough that others were afraid we might find it first. The office had grown completely silent. Even Ethan seemed to sense that something important was unfolding. He had moved from the window and now sat beside me, quietly drawing on a legal pad one of the assistants had given him. Every so often he glanced up at the adults, trying to understand why everyone looked so serious. I looked down at the email again. The words refused to leave my mind. Find Margaret and Ethan before Claire discovers what Ryan left behind. Before Claire discovers. Not after. Before. That single word changed everything. It suggested there was still something hidden. Something valuable enough that people had spent years searching for it. Nathan slowly closed the folder. There is one more thing you need to see. My pulse quickened. He opened a locked drawer and removed a small metal box. It was not large. About the size of a hardcover book. The surface showed faint scratches from years of use. Nathan placed it carefully on the desk. Ryan left this with me 6 months before he passed away. I stared at the box. What is inside? I do not know. That answer surprised me. Nathan gave a small shrug. Ryan instructed me never to open it. He said it belonged to you if certain events occurred. My heart began beating faster. And those events occurred? Unfortunately, yes. He slid a small envelope toward me. Taped to the top was a handwritten note. Once again, I recognized Ryan's handwriting instantly. Mom, if you are holding this box, trust your instincts. Not everyone's story is what it seems. A chill ran through me. Ethan leaned closer. Did Dad write that too? Yes, I whispered. Nathan handed me a key attached to a faded blue keychain. The keychain immediately caught my attention. Ryan had owned it since college. I remembered because he used to joke that it was so ugly nobody would ever steal it. Suddenly, I could hear his laugh in my memory. For a moment, the years disappeared. Then reality returned. Slowly, I inserted the key into the lock. The click sounded unusually loud inside the office. I lifted the lid. Inside were several documents, a flash drive, and a sealed envelope labeled for Margaret only. My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope. Nathan looked away respectfully. I opened it and unfolded the single sheet inside. The first sentence made my stomach drop. Mom, if Claire ever tells you that my company was my greatest success, she is lying. I stopped breathing for a second. I continued reading. The company was never the most important thing I built. The most important thing was hidden where nobody thought to look. My eyes raced down the page. There was no explanation. No details. Only one final instruction written beneath it. Find Jonathan. He knows where it is. I lowered the letter slowly. Nathan was already watching me. You understand now why Jonathan never stopped looking for you? He asked. I nodded weakly. For the first time, I realized Ryan had not simply left Ethan money. He had left behind a mystery. And somewhere beyond those office walls, the final piece of it was still waiting to be found. The sun was beginning to sink behind the skyline when we finally left Nathan's office. The city below glowed with soft golden light. And for the first time in years, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed. Not certainty, not happiness, hope. It was fragile and unfamiliar, but it was there. Daniel escorted Ethan and me back to the elevator. Neither of us spoke much. My mind was still racing through everything I had learned. The trust, the missing documents, Jonathan Pierce, the box, the letter. Every answer seemed to reveal two new questions. Yet one thing had become clear. Ryan had never abandoned us. He had spent years preparing for Ethan's future. Somehow, despite everything that had happened, that truth alone gave me strength. When we reached the lobby, Ethan slipped his hand into mine. "Grandma?" he asked. "Yes, sweetheart. Dad knew we would be okay, did he not?" I looked down at him. His blue eyes were so much like Ryan's that it sometimes caught me off guard. I swallowed hard and nodded. "I think he hoped we would be." Ethan smiled softly. "Then I think we will be." Children say things adults spend years trying to understand. We stepped outside and found another black sedan waiting at the curb. Before we could approach it, a familiar voice called my name. "Margaret." I turned. A tall man was walking toward us from the opposite side of the plaza. His hair was touched with gray, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. The moment I saw him, I recognized the face from the photograph inside Ryan's box. Jonathan Pierce. He stopped a few feet away and looked directly at Ethan. For a moment his expression softened with unmistakable emotion. "You look just like your father," he said quietly. Ethan smiled politely. Jonathan then turned to me. "Ryan talked about both of you constantly." I did not know what to say. Too much had happened already. Jonathan seemed to understand. "There will be time for questions," he said. "But first, there is something Ryan wanted you to see." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" A faint smile appeared on his face. "The final piece." He opened the rear door of the sedan. Inside sat a leather portfolio secured with a combination lock. "Ryan asked me to protect this until the day you were found." I stared at it. The portfolio looked ordinary. Yet after everything I had learned, I knew appearances meant very little. Jonathan rested a hand on the door. "What is inside belongs to Ethan." Ethan looked up at me, confused but curious. I squeezed his shoulder gently. Jonathan's smile widened slightly. "Your father left you many things," he said. "Money was only one of them." The evening breeze moved softly through the street as the city lights began to appear one by one. Standing there beside my grandson, I realized how much had changed since that morning. Less than 12 hours earlier, we had been sitting outside a shelter wondering how we would get through another week. Now we were standing at the edge of a future Ryan had spent years building for us. And somewhere inside that portfolio was the secret he believed mattered more than anything else he had ever created.